Everybody ruled me out, brushed me off because of my condition. When I was born, I had multiple fractures because they yanked me out. When I was supposed to be growing, I'd be fracturing. There's nothing I can do to make people like me or accept me. I've been fetishized. I've been preyed upon. I'm a sexual assault survivor. Disability is a social construct. I am only disabled by depending on who I am with and where I am. Why would I want to be something that I clearly was born not to be? You asked me, why do I never want to walk? Well, why? Why would I want to?
Today on the SuperPower Podcast, I'm excited to welcome Samantha Renke, an actress, presenter, writer, and disability rights campaigner. Ranked number 3 in the Sure Trust Power 100 list of 2020 for the UK's most influential disabled people, Samantha's impact resonates far and wide. With humour and passion, Samantha shares her powerful story of living with Brittle Bone Condition, unpacking harmful stereotypes and challenging unconscious bias towards disabled people. And through her lived experiences, she's empowered communities to see disability not as a limitation, but as a strength. Samantha's on-screen credits include hosting ITV's Fresh Cuts Unfiltered Woman and appearances on This Morning, Loose Women, Good Morning Britain, and even the Celebrity Antiques Road Trip. As a columnist for The Metro and Enable, and an author of her debut book, You Are the Best Thing Since Sliced Bread, Samantha inspires others to embrace life to the fullest and to celebrate individuality. She's also a trustee for the Brittle Bone Society and an ambassador for Scope. And Samantha is here with me today to share her remarkable journey and her life lessons that will inspire and empower all of us. Sam, welcome to the show. How are we doing, my friend?
Thank you for having me. I feel a little bit, underprepared for such glamour and elegance. I mean, well, now I'm back up north. Yeah. I was kind of, embodying that, Shoreditch, East London trendy vibe when I was in London for 12 years, but recently moved back to the Northwest. Not only has my accent come back, although, no, I think I've softened it a little bit for you. When I'm back up north, I'm like, you're all right, put it on table,
Well, we know I'm from the north as well, so I feel like my accent's going to change throughout this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's been too long since we last saw one another.
I know.
Both our faults.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to a good conversation today.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think, Sam, as people know this show, we're all about exploring people's lives, going deep into people's stories before we get to the present day and all the wonderful stuff you're up to. And so, we just filled in the graph of life. We went through some of the highs and lows of your life. And I want to start by going back to your earliest childhood memory, Sam. What is that earliest memory you have?
When we just did this exercise, it actually surprised me, but maybe not surprised me, because I think as human beings, we're always gravitating towards the negativity bias. So we always tend to pick out, that one horrible comment, that one horrible experience, because it's a fight or flight, I guess.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting because I work in journalism, because I do a lot of writing, because I talk a lot about my disabled life. It was interesting when you asked me what were my initial, memories, and 2 sprang to mind. So I'm going to tell you both.
Go on.
Because one ended up being stronger and more positive, I guess, tinged with a bit of sadness, but we'll go into that. But the first one, and maybe it's because I've written about it recently, and when I actually was writing about something completely different, this memory unlocked. And it's to do with shame. Okay. Shame and disability is something that I was writing about. So essentially, not feeling like you should or lesser than because you ask for help as a disabled person, whether that's benefits, whether that's having a caregiver, whether that's depending on friends and so on and so forth. So I think that was what I was writing about. But interestingly, when I started writing this, I had a memory, and a very, very early memory, because before I went to mainstream school, so before, the academic world was like, well, actually, Samantha has a physical disability, but cognitively she is sound and, quite, with it, quite bright, quite sparky. I had to go to what we would probably identify still today as a special school.
Right.
So a school where, children with varied disabilities, children who are neurodivergent would get put to be assessed. And then either they remained there or they would be transitioned onto, mainstream school. And I was in one of those schools. And I understand the assessment because, you don't want to put a child into an environment where they're not going to flourish. But at that time, so my condition meant that not only did I fracture my bones frequently, and as a young child, that could happen weekly. As a baby, I'd be carried on a pillow because my bones were so fragile. So I must have been, so it's like a preschool, even before a preschool, so maybe 3 years old. I think it was called like an early developmental school, And anyway, I would have issues going to the bathroom. My body doesn't produce collagen, type 1 collagen, and that's why my condition is called Brittle Bone Condition, because your bones are predominantly made up of collagen, but actually collagen is everywhere in our body. It's not just what you pump into your lips, it makes up your skin, your hair, your nails. Right. And essentially, as a youngster, I had lazy bowels. My bowels were very lazy because your bowels are made up of collagen and it wasn't functioning. So I used to have suppositories every day as a child, and obviously, painful, invasive, trauma. I had to sit on the toilet. I remember just being sat on the potty and I had to wait and wait so before I had any bowel movement. So I associated from a young age going to the bathroom as trauma. And this one memory that unlocked just now that I also wrote about, and I think maybe it unlocked today because actually when I disclosed it to someone, they didn't give me the response that I was kind of wanting maybe or hoping for. But I remember having soiled myself as a toddler, and the caregiver was angry with me because I didn't want to say I needed to the toilet. And I just remember, and I don't know whether, it's crazy to think at age 3 or 3.5 that you can have such vivid memories, but I remember being in the bathroom of this school, and they had the tiles on the ceiling, like the push tile, like the...
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and I remember, and she lifted up my legs and was wiping my bottom, but she was doing it quite rigorously, and I was being scolded. And I think that was the first time I ever felt shame in knowing that I needed that help. And at the end of the day, irrespective of my disability, I was a child.
Yeah.
I needed that help. And I guess that kind of came, first of all, that was the first memory when we went through this exercise that popped into my head. And I guess when I wrote about it, the person I submitted to was quite just glossed over it. And I didn't get the email back saying, wow, I'm sorry you went through that. Thank you for sharing. I think it's going to resonate with our readers. And there's no judgment on that particular individual. Sometimes I guess when you get handed hundreds of, things to look through every day, you might become desensitized or you're just going through the motions. So I'm not angry at that individual, but I think what was shocking was, I think disabled people wear their hearts on their sleeve a lot. We are kind of expected to a degree to be so open about our needs and our experiences, because the non-disabled world, or the term I really like at the moment, pre-disabled world, basically, needs us to tell us where, how can we be an ally? Well, what that means is we're constantly having to rekindle these traumas and go over a lot of this ableism, disableism, discrimination, these horrible things that we've experienced in life. Yeah. So that sprung to mind. But a nicer one was actually when I was about 5. I was actually really unwell, but I'd been invited to a girl in my class, her fancy dress party, and my mum had made me a Little Mermaid outfit, like the full fin and everything. I had crimped hair, and I've got this beautiful photo of me sat on the floor with a multicoloured 80s carpet, as we all know. And I'm sat with a bob, blonde hair bob, crimped hair, and I'm sat with a little bikini top on and this big fin. Yeah. And I looked pale as a sheet because I was so unwell. I had a sicky bug, and I was like, I really want to go to the party, because even at that age, I understood that I wasn't always invited places. And my mum was like, okay, you can go to the party. And I sat, I just remember being sat at the side on a chair and watched all the kids play, but I was so happy just to be there. And I love that photo of me because the irony is, I idolized The Little Mermaid, which the story wanting to walk. I mean, Freud that, but also just knowing
Freud that.
Freud would have a field day with me. But I think just loving, first of all, my spirit came out in that, the fact that I love fancy dress. I love to feel pretty.
Yeah.
I love to explore my creativity. I wasn't scared to be a bit wacky with big hair, even at that age. But I also understood, sadly, that I needed to push my own body and my own health so that I wouldn't miss out on milestones in my life. So they were the two main things that sprung out to me. So
And there's so much, I mean, you've touched on so many topics there that I want to delve into, but one of them you mentioned about your mum and the party. And I just want to go back so we can learn here, anybody who's listening, because you mentioned there about brittle bones.
Yes.
Okay. And I know you in recent years sat down with your mum, didn't you, about what it was like at your birth? Because before you were born, your mum and dad were there and they already had a daughter, your sister.
Yeah.
And then you were born and they didn't know at the time.
How dare they have another child?
And they didn't know at the time that you had brittle bones. Yeah. Just tell us a bit more about brittle bones, which is also osteogenesis imperfecta type 3.
Spell it 3 times fast. No, I can't even spell it.
But tell us a little bit about it, please.
So what you said is true. So both my parents are non-disabled, young parents. My dad was British in the army, based in Nordrhein-Westfalen in Germany. My mum, German, was a nurse, met on the barracks. It's quite a sweet kind of, coming together. Had my sister who is non-disabled, very much, still living with my grandma, my Oma, in Germany. Then I came along and I was born with this, they call it a rare condition, but actually, it impacts 1 in 15,000 in the UK, but there are different variations of it. I'm not going to use the term severity because I think that conjures up some negativity, but there are different types of osteogenesis, OI, brittle bones. I've got type 3, which is what they would describe as a kind of a different mutation of the gene. I'm happy using that term, mutation of the gene, because that's exactly what it is. It's a gene that's deviated from, the norm. Whereas all the other types of OI, as far as I'm aware, are hereditary. So it'd be passed down generations, and you'd have a child and you'd have that 50-50 chance. Whereas me, no one in my family, as far as we are aware, had that condition. So essentially what it means is I don't produce the type 1 collagen. Again, as I said, which is everywhere, essentially. And my bones do break very, easily. So if you think, as a baby, as a child, if I was fracturing a couple of times a week, when I was supposed to be growing, I'd be fracturing. So my body would be like, hang on a minute, I need to solve the fracture before we give her a growth spurt. So people with OI tend to be petite anyway, but I think a lot of our stature and a lot of how our bones are, shaped and formed, you probably can't tell, but I used to be right-handed, but I would fracture my right hand so much that I learned to write with my left. Like I don't have too much bowing. I've had metal rods put in both of my legs. I've had my whole spine rodded because my spine started to twist and kind of get an S shape to it, scoliosis. It was a fluke, and when I was born, it came as a shock. And I wrote my memoir 2 years ago now. Isn't that crazy? 2 years. You are the best thing since sliced bread. I'm going to plug that.
Oh, yeah. We'll get onto that.
Multiple times throughout today's session. And I spoke to my mum, who's quite typically German in not very forthcoming with emotion, shall we say. But I spoke about my birth and she said, sadly, your birth was more like a bereavement than a cause for celebration. And that isn't a reflection on her love for me, but more so how the external world responded. So she said, God bless her, she said, no one really came to visit her in hospital because, again, disability is often synonymous with tragedy. Like, oh, what a, that's what you do. Well, I mean, what do all parents say? Like, oh, I don't care if it's a boy or a girl. I just want it to be healthy. And I've always challenged that, going like, but what if it's not healthy?
Yeah.
Like, let's be careful of how we approach people's existence and lives. But essentially, a lot of the doctors, I was transferred to a different hospital straight away. I had a natural birth. Well, my mum had a natural birth. So as you can imagine, pulling out a brittle bone child naturally, I was basically born. I had fractures in utero, so in my mum's belly. Okay. And then when I was born, I had multiple fractures because they yanked me out and essentially broke everything. But I think the prognosis or the vibe, let's call it the vibe, was, everyone was very pessimistic,
okay.
Pray for her, she won't survive. And then, when I did start to show signs that, okay, I'm going to go past this milestone, I'm going to go past that milestone, it was never like, oh, well, actually, this is a beautiful life. This is, it was still like, well, even if she does, she won't go to school, or she won't do that, and she won't do this. And it always angers me. I'm trained as a teacher. That's where my postgrad comes from. And, one of the biggest things, I loved sociology at university, and one of the things that stood with me during that time and also in my time as a teacher was, the impact of labeling someone repeatedly, falsely, that often turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy, which essentially means you become that label. And I just think, how dare anybody? It makes me quite mad now, looking at my life now and who I am and how content I am in my life. It makes me incredibly mad to think that pretty much everybody, ruled me out, brushed me off because of my condition, something they knew nothing about and they will know nothing about because they don't have lived experience. And, I have fought most of my life to negate those harmful stereotypes and those labels. And thank bloody God I did, and thank God up there, and thank my dad up there as well, who was looking down on me because they gave me the strength. But I just think how I'm very mindful now moving forward that to never judge or to never label anything, even animals, because I think every sentient being has the potential to surprise everyone.
Yeah. No, it isn't. I mean, there's so much that we're covering here, but on the bone side of things, could you mention that from being a baby to today? So I believe, am I right in saying you've broken over 200 bones?
Yeah, I mean, that's a kind of a guesstimate.
Okay, sure.
And I wanted to make it very clear because it sounds very dramatic when you say 200 bones. Like, there's all different types of bone fractures. You don't have to have a complete snap coming out of your skin, compound fracture. Like, you can have what we would call a hairline fracture.
Right.
That can happen very regularly. Interesting, even on the way in the taxi ride here, he had to slam on the brakes because of a cyclist, and I was holding on, and I actually don't know whether I've got a slight little crack in my elbow, but it's a hairline fracture. And I don't mean to be dismissive. The one beautiful thing, ironically, about having brittle bones is, so to dispel some of the myths, yes, I feel the bone. People think I don't feel it, which blows my mind a little bit. Yes, I feel pain. I have the same nerve endings. I feel a break. The only saving grace is, I understand my body so well that I think sometimes if you were to play football and you've never fractured anything in your life and you trip over in a football field and you have quite a bad fracture to your ankle, your body would go into shock and you would panic. And that's the worst thing that you could do because your blood goes to the wrong places, goes to your heart instead of to protect the bone. So when I fracture, yes, it hurts and it hurts a lot. But I know how to, a bit like a monk, I guess, a Buddhist monk, I know how to meditate. Yeah. I know how to slow my breathing down. I know how to be in that moment and risk assess and think, okay, this has happened, right? Don't panic. What do I have to do? So I think that really helps with the pain. But we do weirdly kind of heal. The new bone is rubbish. The new bone that heals is really bad.
Okay.
It's porous. It's even more fragile. It's callous, So the bone, whenever you fracture, and when you fracture, the bone will not form in a nice smooth line. So that's why you'll end up getting deformities. Okay. So for me, when I fracture, the biggest inconvenience is thinking, when this bone heals, will I lose more of my mobility? Because when this bone heals, if it doesn't heal straight, I may lose just that millimeter of movement in my arm. And that millimeter may be the difference between me grabbing something from a shelf or having someone else grab.
Got it. Yeah.
But what it does mean is my healing is pretty quick. A doctor described it as, it always stuck in my head. He said, think of your bone marrow, cut your bone in half. Think of it like an aero chocolate, which is a chocolate with lots of holes. But think of your holes like being really big, like really, instead of tiny little pinpricks, like they're big. So your body's constantly thinking that you're broken. So my body is always in repair. That's why I'm always quite hot and warm, because and I get tired quite quickly because my body's on constant, you're broken. But what it does mean is when I have a big fracture, my body within seconds starts working. Whereas your body might be like, well, you know what, it'll be all right for a minute. I'll give him like 24 hours, and then maybe we'll start working on fixing you.
and Sam, obviously this is great as well, learning so much here. But like you mentioned before, I'm going back to the Little Mermaid. I digress
as quite a lot.
No, it's okay. I'll bring us back. A Little Mermaid. You're at that party, and you mentioned there like certain feelings that you felt, and the Freud would have a field day here, because you've said as a youngster you never wanted to walk.
Yeah.
Just tell me a little bit about that, because people might think, oh, would she not? Would she want to? Would she, without judgment? Where does that come from?
I think I always lead in with the fact that I was just quite clever, and I knew that because my mum said that I would never, even as a toddler, even before I had a real consciousness of knowing what my condition was, I guess, I never had that instinct to, like a baby pulls up on a table. Right. No, I think I just knew. But also I think I was really lazy. I think I was just a bit lazy. And I think I'm a bit of a princess, and I love people cooing over me. And I got a lot of that attention as a child. So I think I just was like, right, if you're going to do it, then, we'll lead on to that, because it gets into hot water when you go, everyone can do everything for you. And we'll talk about that a bit later. But I guess I've never wanted to walk, because why would I want to be something that I clearly was born not to be? Like, you wouldn't go up to someone of a different sexual orientation and go, but I bet you wish you'd straight, though. Bet you wish you'd straight. Or you wouldn't go up to a man and go, but I bet you wish you, don't lie to me. I bet you wish, like, being a man must be hard work, so I bet you secretly you want to be a woman. Yeah. Like, why then would you go up to a wheelchair user and go, it'd be nice if you could walk? Why? Why? Because in your existence, in your reality, that's what makes you feel comfortable. In my reality, being in a wheelchair makes me feel comfortable. Yep. When I look at my wheelchair, I don't look at it when I wake up in the morning and go, oh, crap. Another day in a wheelchair. I go, great. That's going to get me to the toilet. That's going to get me to feed my cats. That's going to get me to go shopping.
Yes.
And
hang on, you've segued me nicely here. Talking about shopping and perceptions and society then. There is a certain moment I know in your life when you were at IKEA with your mum and your sister that really was a bit of a turning point.
Mention IKEA.
Oh, yeah.
Sponsored by IKEA.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not.
It is now.
Tell me about that moment, because what changed in your mind that day?
So I think even though my childhood was relatively quote unquote normal, I had a roof over my head, I had loving parents, I had a sibling that, a very normal sibling. I had a best friend, Laura, who was my best friend in primary school. She lived opposite the road from me. So, and my dad was an antiques dealer, so we'd go to car boots and I had a good childhood. I'd go to Germany to see my grandma each year, get lots of chocolate. So even though I had these moments of, wow, I'm different, wow, the world isn't necessarily set up for me, I felt up until the age of 9, which we can get into, I felt very safe and secure. But I guess teenage years, like any teenager, I struggled with my identity. But that was partly because of my disability, partly because age 9, my dad suddenly passed away. And that threw my whole family into... He was 38, and ironically, I'm 38. And it's crazy to think... I don't know whether when you outlive a parent, it's weird. Do you not think? It's like, wow, And I remember when he passed away, we were immigrating to America. We had our house up for sale. We got all the green cards. My mum had redone her nursing qualifications because they're transferable.
Yeah.
We were set to go. So we were going to go to America. And then my auntie's actually a Maori. So she's in New Zealand. So we were eventually going to settle in New Zealand. So big life.
Plans, yeah.
Crazy. And then I woke up one morning and I remember, again, trauma, it's amazing. You can smell and see everything. I woke up one morning and I heard a really weird noise, and I was in my bedroom, and my dad had made me, because as a child I used to shuffle on the floor, bum shuffle. That was my main way of getting around instead of a wheelchair in the house.
Yeah.
And he'd made me a makeshift 4-poster bed, but it was like on the floor.
Love it.
So I could just bum shuffle.
In a
So I'm in my
four-poster,
princess room,
Yeah.
pink candy floss. And I remember it was in November, and it was quite a sunny day for November, and that stood out to me. And I was like, why is no one waking me up yet? And I heard this weird noise, and then I must have drifted off to sleep. And then next minute, my mum's waking me up, get up for school, and the noise was still there. And I said, Mummy, what's the noise? So my mum went to investigate, and she went into all the rooms, and then finally went into the bathroom. She opened the bathroom, and my dad collapsed out into the hall. He was having a major brain hemorrhage. And my sister was downstairs, and she was drying her hair for school. So I was trying to scream my sister. She couldn't hear. And obviously I can't walk. And I remember I had to crawl over my dad's body to get to the telephone to dial 999. I remember it was a really weird old phone, and I pressed 999 and nothing there was no dial tone, no nothing. And then I finally got through, and the woman on the phone, she was like, you need to go and get your sister, go downstairs and get her. And I said, I can't walk. And she could almost get frustrated with me. She went, you're in shock, walk downstairs. And I went, I'm disabled, I can't. And then again, that helplessness, that feeling of, oh my God, my disability is going to be so detrimental to my dad and his well-being. Sadly, the brain hemorrhage was so significant. We had to turn off his life support the next day. But yeah, where we go, well, that was the kind of trauma. And I guess, that was, you talk to anybody who's lost a child, who's lost a parent, as a child, that's your childhood gone. That was when,
And that's 29 years ago,
Yeah.
I guess now.
Yeah, November the 13th.
Wow.
14th was his anniversary.
And I always say, I think these moments, we don't move on from them, you move on with them, right?
Yeah.
And your dad's memory, and I'm sure
Yeah.
be so proud of who
Yeah.
you've become. But so we've got this young girl, age 9,
Yes,
as you say.
exactly, yeah. And IKEA, that's where we get around.
Yeah, we're going to get to IKEA. But
yes.
just to paint the picture then, so this young
Yeah.
girl, age 9, a lot
Yeah.
going on already from a young age
Yeah.
that's making you aware of things.
Absolutely.
Then this happens with your
Yeah.
dad.
And I think, obviously,
Yeah.
so, we went from immigrating,
Yeah.
to all of a sudden not me having to go to high school. We weren't going to do that. We were going to be homeschooled and travel. We were going to be them people, like camper van, let's do this. And then facing not only, my mum, and this isn't her journey, and I don't want to talk about my mum too much, but my mum, understandably, don't forget, she's German. She's in a foreign country now on her own with 2 children, one of whom is disabled. My dad, God bless him, typical kind of army man, overbearing, shall we say that, protective. So I know my mum lost her independence, married to my dad, which a lot of people can relate to. So for her, it was like starting all over again. So she, struggled. Then the high school that I was supposed to go to, and this is back in the day when the law wasn't in favor of protecting disabled people's rights. So the high school where all my friends were going to, where my sister was at, they would not put a lift in the high school. They said, sorry, we're not going to make the school accessible for
And your mum was
Samantha.
speaking to them, I'm guessing, asking.
Well, I
for this,
mean,
or what's the...
I don't know what went behind the scenes.
But they just
I
wouldn't
think, I love my mum, but I think sometimes, she's not always that forthcoming.
Sure.
Advocating for things.
It's just hard, I guess. She's thrown into this scenario
exactly,
without your dad.
Exactly. And so I had to go to a completely different school. So all of a sudden I went from Samantha, the girl who liked animals of farthing wood and who had big Benetton multicoloured glasses, to the girl in the wheelchair. And high school was hell for me, if I'm completely honest. Not a nice time. dealing with a lot of shit back home, excuse my language, dealing with a lot of hardship back home. Again, I'm not going to go into the details. Mental health played a big role. Struggling with just, life. And I struggle with my identity, I guess, I wasn't popular, but I wasn't the geek either. I was kind of in between. So I would get invited to parties and things. Like I was included. Like I wasn't completely ostracized in school. But I think that's mostly due to the fact that I'm quite loud and I kind of made my presence. I wasn't a victim.
Yeah.
I wouldn't cower in the corner. Like if a bully said something to me, I was like, "Come on, then!" And then I'd get into trouble as well. And then my sister, big sister Stephanie, would come into my school playground and like pin a girl up, like, what are you doing to my sister? Don't know whether I could say that on camera. Yeah. But my sister was my biggest like champion growing up. But yeah, I struggle with it, and I struggle with body image. And I guess when I went to college, even though I found my clique when I went to college, so obviously in the UK, college is separate to university. Sure. I loved college. I found my clique. I was able to wear my own clothes, and I expressed myself through fashion. But I also recognised that, boys didn't want anything to do with me. I was very much infantilized, and I went into quite a deep depression. Academically, I was quite strong, but I think confidence-wise, I wasn't. And also, in a societal context, disabled kids are cute. We want to protect them. We want to give them money. We want to fundraise for wheelchairs. And we have programs on TV, that are dedicated to donating to cute, vulnerable, innocent, disabled kids. As soon as you get closer to 18, you're a burden on society. You're a benefit scrounger. And I started to feel that, so some of the resources that I actually had in place, like going to hydrotherapy, they were taken away overnight.
As soon as you become 18.
So again, I really struggle with it. And why IKEA is significant, I think at the time I was really battling with depression as a adolescent, and my mum and sister dragged me to IKEA. And I remember I think I was wearing a hat, and I was wearing like bright red lipstick. And as a disabled person, I always get stared at in the street. It's really difficult now because now I'm on television, so you just never know whether people are being rude or whether they just want an autograph. So I can't like go at them anymore now, because I've done that. I've actually gone, "What are you staring at?" And they go, "Oh, was it you that was on the telly like that?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, sorry, just thought you were being really ignorant." But I got stared at, and I guess when you're a teenager and people are laughing at you in the street or pointing at you or taking unsolicited pictures. Or talking about you in earshot, it's a lot, And when I was in the shop, everyone was staring at me, and when we got out to the car park, I just had a major meltdown, and I was like, I hate it. I'm done. I can't go on. Everyone's staring at me. Like, there's nothing I can do. That I can't change myself. Like, what, there's nothing I can do to make people like me or accept me. And my sister, who was very much like more into sports. I was like the girly girl, and she was like the sporty girl. So very different style in terms of fashion. She was very casual, hips, just like, effortless, like sporty gear. Yeah. And I was like, yes, and this is a hat, and this is a bow, and this is a brooch. And she knelt down next to me and she said, "Have you ever thought that people are staring at you because they like your outfit? Because every time you leave the house, no matter how you feel, you're immaculately dressed. You think about everything from your nail polish to your accessories to your hair, And I'd never seen the world through that lens before. And this is something that I share with everybody now, because that negativity bias, we can always err on the side of they're staring at me because they're a horrible person. They want to make me feel insignificant. And yes, there might be people out there, maybe a lot of people out there, but just on the odd occasion, maybe change your thought process and think, they're looking at me because I'm beautiful, or they're looking at me because they actually really want to know where my lipstick's from. And when I kind of talk to people about that, a lot of people share experiences when they go, oh, do you know what? That happened to me. I was on the bus and, you know, someone was staring at me and made me feel very, very, you know, insecure. But when they left the bus, they went, where are your shoes from? You know?
Yeah.
And I think we can all kind of take that on. And irrespective of whether those individuals' intentions are good or bad, it's how you respond to that. I now, you know, take the thought process that I'm not going to let anyone interfere with my day. You know, it doesn't always work. Sometimes when it's that time in the month and when I'm feeling very hormonal, when I'm feeling burnt out with work, it's very, very hard to not let external invalidation impact my life. But on the whole, I'm, you know, when people stare at me, I now smile at them, and in a creepy way, like this. And 9 times out of 10, people do. They either snap out of the trance that they're glaring at me, or I'll go, "You're all right," you know, which is when northern people go, "You're all right," it just means hi. Yeah. How are you? We don't want a response. Yes.
Sam, let's say like if anybody's listening and they think, you know, they lack confidence or they worry about what people think of them. You know, it doesn't have to come through the lens of disability necessarily. What would you say to them if somebody's listening and think, oh, do you know what? I do care about what people think too much. It really affects me. What could they do about it?
Gosh, it's difficult because I think everyone's got a backstory. I think it sounds cliche. I've just shared with you about my own father, and, you know, life is short and you need to make a decision. Are you going to let others dictate how your life looks? You know, when you're on your deathbed, are you going to be like, well, I wish I would have worn that bright red dress? You know, so I think that is helpful to just be like, you know what? Yes, everybody's going to rattle your cage from time to time, but it's how you respond to it, you know? And so I don't know whether it's a famous expression or, you know, something like this, you know, most people are too consumed with thinking about what people are thinking about them to actually bother to think about what you're doing, you know? And I think that is true to a certain degree. We've all got an opinion. But find things that bring you joy. This is true, and I don't share this with many people. I work in television. I'm in front of the camera a lot. I will never watch anything that I do back. Because I will pick it to death. I'll go, your nose is crooked, your mouth looks weird, this is wrong, you look fat. And I absolutely will. And I think there's a misconception when you see somebody who's in the public eye on television that they're all great and it's, you know, happy with themselves. No, like there's a lot of trauma there. What I know is, in this moment, I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah.
That's what brings me joy. Last night, I couldn't sleep. I was up at 4 because I was like, oh, I'm going to do something amazing. Wow, isn't my life amazing?
Yeah.
You know, the other week I was at the Wicked premiere.
Yeah.
You know, I've just had a new talk show out. Like, I love my life. I love life. That's great. But it doesn't mean that I don't feel insecure, and it doesn't mean that I don't have a wobble.
But I think the point there, as you say, is like we're all human. We all have our insecurities, imposters within us. But actually, and you mentioned a lot about negativity bias. Actually, if you flip that mindset sometimes, and I say a lot like I get to, I don't have to. You know, there's so many great things out there and to focus on the positives. But just flipping that into like mental health, you mentioned that a little bit around depression and challenges in your teenage years. And I know therapy can play a big role. And I want to look at, I guess, some of the societal expectations on disabled people when it comes to motherhood, dating. Just talk to me a little bit about that, because I don't think it's spoken about enough. And I know you do talk about it.
Yeah, so again, just to paint a clearer picture, there's 1.3 billion disabled people in the world. We are the fastest growing underserved group. You know, we've got an aging population. I used that term pre-disabled earlier, which essentially means that actually because we are living longer, essentially, unless you come to a quick demise, you will become disabled at some point in your life, whether that's hearing loss, whether that's going in for a hip replacement. So I only have my lived experience as a disabled person. So I just want to make it really clear that whenever I say there'll be disabled and neurodivergent people out there that will go, yes, bang on, Samantha, that resonates with me. We had very similar experiences. But there'll also be disabled people out there who'll be like, I can't relate to what she's saying. And I tentatively say that because when I talk about relationship, when I talk about motherhood, there are plenty of disabled people who are married, who have got multiple children, who have never had an issue with dating. So I don't want it to be this blanket.
Of course.
It's problematic for everyone.
Yeah.
However, my experience, and again, it's a shared experience with some disabled people, I think dating can be difficult. I think there is so many stereotypes associated with disability, particularly if you're a disabled woman, around motherhood, around being able to be that good partner. I think I feel it more. Again, I don't have statistics here, so
Sure.
I don't know whether this is true or not, but I find it more difficult when I speak to disabled women, more so than disabled men. And maybe that's because, again, sweeping generalization, women tend to be a bit more of the caregivers, caring, kind of don't see past barriers. Maybe that's because, we've got that tend to have that maternal instinct. Whereas guys tend to be more about the physicality of a relationship. Again, not all sweeping generalization. But whenever I've had any interaction with men on any romantic level or any interaction randomly, there's always been an undertone of sexualization. Right. So I'll give you an example. I was at Euston Station a few weeks back, and football was on, so there was a lot of groups of men intoxicated, which is not a good mix. I was making my way to a taxi, and luckily I had a witness. Someone was escorting me, and a group of lads, and I already preempted it because I'm always on high alert when I'm around these drunken men. And a group of lads came close to me, and I just ducked my head down, which again is not me. I hold my head up high. I was off to my friend's birthday. I looked beautiful. I had my party gear on. I had my designer handbag. Yeah. I looked, great. But I ducked my head, and one of the lads came up right next to me, and he pointed his finger to me and went, "Oi, lads, would you fuck that?"
Oh, God.
And then they all laughed, and then they walked away. So if you want to know what my experience is of men, and this is online, first thing they ask is, can you have sex? I've been fetishized. I've been preyed upon by what I would consider as predators, who prey on me because I look younger than I am. I'm physically young, petite. I'm a sexual assault survivor. Again, we don't talk about it because we assume that disabled people are, we infantilize them, we treat them like children. We don't assume that we are sexual beings because we might not want to know. We might not want to know that disabled people are having sex or are into bondage or into kinky things or have a full rich sex life because we want to kind of put them in this bubble. So when we are targeted and when we are victims or survivors, of assault in any way, shape or form. And I've spoken to other disabled women who, for example, have, even with partners, they've had their wheelchairs removed in an argument. They've had their prosthetic limbs removed in an argument because their partner's so angry with them. They're like, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take your independence away from you. I've had visually impaired women tell me that they have been molested in the street in broad daylight because the perpetrator has seen them walking with a dog or a cane and thought, well, I can do it because they can't identify me. I get stories like this. Every time I speak about SA, I get stories of this. And the reason why I talk about it, not because I enjoy talking about it, because every time I talk about it, I'm reliving my own traumatic experience. But I talk about it because no one is. You're 3 to 4 times more likely to be abused as a disabled person by a caregiver, a partner, because we are, we're not allowed our independence and our autonomy in life. And B, because one of the reasons I actually didn't report the SA was I genuinely didn't think I'd be believed. I genuinely didn't think, because I've had people, even like friends, say to me, well, who would want to have sex with you? So if that
But hang on, friends say that.
Yeah.
So why are they friends?
Well, I mean, maybe they might not be in my life anymore,
Yeah.
but I guess,
Okay.
People who have never been around disability, even then,
Yeah.
who I would, again, call friends, but they're on their journey of just understanding what it's like to be disabled.
Fine.
They may come out with really ignorant comments like that because in their life, they'd be like, well, I would never have a relationship with someone who's in a wheelchair, so they can't fathom. It's like when I used to go clubbing, I used to be a bit of a party animal.
Love it.
And I literally had people come up to me. I'm not condoning being a crazy party animal. It was good though. But I literally had people coming up to me in a nightclub going, oh my God, it's amazing that you're here. And then, oh my goodness, you're drinking alcohol? And I'm sat there going, yes. So there's this, would you call it cognitive dissonance? There's this kind of cognitive dissonance towards disabled people. And that leaves a lot of disabled people very vulnerable when it comes to relationships. And again, I didn't report it because I genuinely envisioned 2 policemen coming into my home and being like, yeah, whatever. As if. I mean, we've had... It's hard to trust the police in general as a woman anyway. I know this is a sideline, but I think it's difficult anyway. I think the police have need to do a lot of, soul searching in terms of kind of airing out their own unconscious bias when it comes to every minority group or underserved group. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I didn't actually.
Yeah.
But I mean, not up until I wrote my book and I actually said this question. I said, do you know what? No one's ever asked me if I'm dating. Even my mum or my sister, or again, this is not to shame anybody. No one's ever asked me if I wanted children. It's only because when I actually wrote that in my book, I said, that hurts. Like no one's actually ever said to me, like when your parents take an interest or your friends take an interest, even when I was in a good group of girlfriends, no one's like, so are you dating Sam? There was kind of like this void. There is now, but maybe it's because I'm like, why aren't you asking me?
What are you dating?
Like, no, I've got 2 cats, so I'm giving up on men right now.
And would you like to be a mother?
Do you know what? I think it's really difficult. I think I would love someone to travel with.
Nice.
I think it's really hard for a woman anyway, a career woman, because I did put my career first. That was kind of my own choice, but also I was pushed into that because typical relationships didn't come naturally to me.
Okay.
I was either, someone's secret because I didn't want someone, that to know, the world to know they were dating someone who's disabled, and that didn't feel right for my soul for many years. So yeah, I am in therapy. I am trying to not tarnish all men with the same brush.
Yep.
Very difficult. But also, again, just for balance, although I won't get into it, I haven't had strong male role models in my life. And the men in my life have not been men that I would want to look up to as a role model for dating. Does that make sense? So there's the disability element, but there's also the life stuff, Samantha stuff, with other people in my life maybe not having the strongest relationship. So I think that's a big impact as well.
But I think there as well, it's you and you're aware of it, challenging your own biases and assumptions, and not all men are like that, which they're not. But just looking at things a little bit different, because one thing I feel like in getting to know you, you've always brought humour wherever you go. Yeah. Has that been that's just who you are? Has it ever been used as a coping mechanism, do you think?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think it is just who I am. Like, I don't, because the people who know me properly know that I can be very, stoic, and very quiet and very calm. Maybe my PA will tell you otherwise, because I can't actually sit down and have a meal without like pottering around and tidying up or something. But I think it's so, even with the motherhood, where I am in my life now, so at 38, I would love to be a mother, and I know I'd be a good mother. But sometimes there's still part of me that's leaning into, I want to do something to prove that I can do it. And I've done a lot of my life living by that rule. Going to university, I did it because people said I couldn't. Did I enjoy university? Not really. I moved to London because I did it partly for me, but mostly I did it because people didn't think I could. And I have to sit there and have a real conversation with about motherhood, because actually I really like my life. I find having 2 cats hard work at times. I want to travel. I want to do so much with my life that actually, do I want to be a parent? And sometimes I think having disability has freed me from convention. Like, actually, I now get to have that choice. But there is something that niggles me deep down. Is like, do I want to do it because of societal pressures and someone, that ego, being like, well, you can't be a mother, Sam. So I want to be a mother. Or do I just want to be a mother because actually I want to be a mother? And it's really difficult to, I don't know where they...
And I feel everybody faces that, right? Like the societal pressure versus actually, do you know what? Screw society in the nicest way. What brings me joy? What do I actually want to do in my life and do it for me and nobody else, right? Now, just on that, looking wider at the work that you've done, because I know you wrote a book, your memoir, which I've got a copy here.
Have you?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what? You sent me the cutest picture, because you were one of the first people that got my book, and you put it on a shelf behind you, and I think you were on TV or something, and you sent me a picture of my book positioned behind you, and I was just like, that's the cutest thing.
Look at this, two Gyan, to my new friend, 2 powerful, strong souls coming together to make a positive change. But on this, I know the book is a lot about being unapologetically imperfect, right?
Yeah.
Like, just tell us high level about the book. If somebody was to read the book, what can they expect to learn?
I guess it's a memoir, and it always sounds a bit weird being at 38 and having a memoir, but I feel like I've probably lived about 15 lives already so far. I definitely feel exhausted. It is a, I don't want to say the word self-help book, but there are each chapter is a milestone, very similar to what we're doing today, a milestone, a significant turning point, good and bad, in my life, and my really unapologetic an honest view of what I took away from that. And a lot of the times when I talk about, I talk about my spinal fusion and what I learned from that, because the operation went wrong. And ironically, because it went wrong, how my life went on a trajectory, I probably wouldn't be sat here with you now. So I think it's, again, very similar to what we were talking about earlier, having that swap, changing perspective, not letting others dictate how you're going to live your life, but also being very honest and saying that, I'm still not done. I'm still learning. I actually really like this past year. I've moved out of London, moved back home. And it's a shame the book was written 2 years ago, because I would have loved to have added a chapter, maybe a second book. Even though I still feel very much like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to be an adult, and I don't want to pay taxes, and I hate all that. I found myself really maturing in this last 12 months to a point where I'm actually really proud of myself. Just how I respond to others who I feel maybe can trigger me. And how I respond to that, and just being a lot calmer in general in myself. I feel like this is what's beautiful about my 30s now. My 30s have been hard work in many, many respects. But I think what's been quite nice is finding a bit more of an inner peace with myself, and actually doing things for me rather than the external. So me leaving London was a big risk, because where I've moved to, it's much more rural. I'm more disabled in many ways
because of the environment, because there's a lack of inclusive transport and so on. So in many ways I took a big risk, and also my job is predominantly in London, and you don't want to rock the boat when you're disabled. You don't want to have to ask for more reasonable adjustments. You don't want to ask for more provisions. So it's been a challenge for me just logistically uprooting, but I'm proud of myself, because yes, there have been some work opportunities that have fizzled out because people don't want to invest. People don't want to, accommodate my needs, either let me work remotely or help me with travel costs or so on and so forth. But it's kind of beautiful to know that I've made this decision for my mental health, to be closer to family, to be closer to nature. Yeah.
But if I'm completely honest, one of the main reasons why I left London was, I don't know if you know, in the UK as it stands, only 9% of houses in the UK meet any accessible requirements. So when I moved to London, and I'm not gonna feel ashamed of this, because I think, again, if you're on TV, people think you've got thousands in the bank. And my only option when I moved to London was social housing, because I wasn't allowed to rent anywhere privately because the landlords would not allow me to adapt, because it, quote unquote, would devalue the property. And I to a certain degree, I get it. Like, in an ideal world, all properties should have that requirement, but we're not in that ideal world. And I understand a landlord going, I'm not going to get someone to dig up my bathroom, put in a wet room, and then go after 6 months and then leave me with having to. So I kind of get where that comes from. So I was very, very grateful to have a beautiful little flat in central London, which, you know, essentially met my basic needs. But I did sit there one day, and I'm not ashamed of saying this. I sat there and I went, is this it, Samantha? Is this it now? And it's not to sound ungrateful, but I sat there and I was in a 1-bedroom. I'd recently transferred from a manual chair to a power chair, so I started using a power chair more often. I was taking corners off the doors because there just wasn't enough space for me. And I was like, I deserve better. I work hard. I'm a good person. I give back to charities and society. I feel like I deserve just a little bit more, as any young person does, you know? So I chose to go back home. I had an opportunity to take over the family home. So my mum is now my landlord.
Love it.
I can't believe she makes me pay rent. I feel really annoyed about that. I'm sure she's putting a little bit aside for me in like a little trust fund. Hopefully.
Yeah.
I hope so. Mum, if you're listening. But what's nice is making that choice for me.
Yeah.
And being like, I've done that for me rather than what society wants. But I think it's, you know, it's very scary being in the big bad world when you're disabled, because going back to the relationship question, I'm in my forever home now. I don't have the luxury of moving wherever I want to. If I were to meet somebody, they would have to come to me. Okay. I don't, unless we become multimillionaires overnight, which I'm not ruling it out.
And they'll build that house, and
we can build a house wherever, castle. You know, I'll be floating in the sky. Yeah. But, you know, these are real things. These are real barriers that, you know, disabled people have to think about and have to be realistic about. And that's kind of sad. Yeah. That's kind of sad, because that cuts off your independence. That cuts off how you know, create your world. And I think, again, a lot of people probably think, oh, disabled people don't put themselves out there, but maybe they're not putting themselves out there because actually it might be detrimental to them. Yeah. Because they might not then have the support network. They might not have an accessible home.
And I think we've spoken about environment. I'm mindful of the time that we might not get into everything now, but I think if people are listening, where they're in the hospitality world, the travel world, there's so much more that can be done. Yeah. You know, I just remember, who was I with? It was a friend of mine who we were trying to meet in a place for lunch, trying to find a restaurant venue, but then suddenly, oh no, we can't because we don't have a ramp, or we don't have this. Yeah. And it's so limiting, to your point, it's the environments. But look, on this show, it's a Superpower podcast. It's my job each and every time to pull out the superpower of our guest, right? And there's so many different directions I could go in with you, which is making it tricky for me. But before I go there, I've got a few like quick fire round questions for you.
I'm not good at quick fire.
And mine are normally like not the quickest fire round.
That's why I don't go on game shows or anything.
I know. Right. Okay, I've got a few for you now. You're having a dinner party. You can invite 3 guests who are here with us or no longer. Who would you have at the party?
I mean, the obvious would be my dad, but then I'd have to like explain all my naughty behaviour so I probably
there's no limit on this dinner party.
I probably wouldn't even invite him because it's a shame. Do you know what? I'm just going to be really, really geeky. I'm a huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan.
So you can say buffet. I was like, we don't need to know the dinner yet.
No, Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. And I write a lot about it. And I think just seeing a strong protagonist, a female protagonist, kick vampires' butts as a teenager. It aired a year, pretty much to the month when my dad had passed, and I became fixated on Buffy as a growing up, and that's why I actually went into the world of TV.
Wow,
because I was like, if this petite blonde can do it, you know, I was like, I'm going to do it. So anyone from Buffy, I think that would just be amazing, because I don't get fangirly over any celebrities. Yeah. I've like been in the space of so many like high profile celebrities, and I'm like,
No,
do you not know who I am?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
You should.
Whereas if it's someone from Buffy, I'm like, oh my goodness, hi, can I be your friend? So yeah, that would be cool.
Okay, Buffy's coming. Right, next question then. North or south of England?
Oh, I am a true northerner, but we are friendlier.
I'm getting some faces here because for the first time I feel like we're northerners are dominating this room.
Well, I mean, look, no, northerners, I will always feel like a Londoner in many respects, but it is true. Like, I hate to lean into stereotypes, but we are friendlier.
Oh,
we
you
just
said
are.
it. You heard it here first, everyone.
Friendlier.
If you're visiting England, get to the north. Right, it's your final trip on Earth. Right, but it's going to be nice. Right, we've got 7 days. You're going on a trip. Where are you going?
I just want to be surrounded by animals. So an animal sanctuary, hugging a goat. Like, I just love it. I love the energy of animals.
Safari. It's going to the extreme.
Yeah. But
I'd love to. Have you been on safari?
No, I haven't.
I feel like we need a documentary of you on safari.
I know. So anything that about like no people, the less people. Oh, it sounds really bad, doesn't it?
No, I'm with you.
Do you know what? I do love people, but I do so much people facing for my career and stuff that my zen time is hugging a goat.
Love it. Love it. Right, and if I could give you an unlimited supply of anything for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Pasta.
Just like a type of
bucket
pasta?
Of pasta.
Bucket pasta. Rigatoni,
pasta.
penne, what are we on?
Just pasta.
Right, okay. All varieties, give you pasta.
You know what? I just love... I'm so simple. See, why am I single? I'm so simple and easy.
Chuck a bowl of pasta.
Just get me pasta with a goat and put them together and I'll be happy.
Lass. Anyway. Right, well...
Did other people do really profound answers and then I'm just going, pasta?
I mean, we've had some that are like, imagination, love. But we'll take pasta.
Can I do mine again? No. Oh, I feel rubbish now.
No, you're not. Right. Now, when I've been thinking about your superpower, now I just want to discuss it for the last few minutes before we wrap up. It's pretty tricky because there's a few different areas I could go in, but there's one thing that shines through more than anything else. And don't get me wrong, you've said at times... You've challenged your own beliefs. You've felt that imposter. Yeah. But in all the guests that I've met, something that shines through, you have a strong sense, Sam, of self-acceptance. And not a lot of people do. And they might claim that they do. But I love that you're like, I am who I am.
Yeah.
I'm Samantha. If you don't like me, do on. Yeah. And I feel like we could learn so much from you being accepting of yourself. What does it mean to you to...
Yeah, I think, do you know what? I think when I became more engrossed in my disability, identity and culture, which is something I rejected for a long time, I didn't want anything to do with other disabled people. And only when I became involved with the Brittle Bone Society as a trustee, I met loads of disabled people and I was like, wow, I need to check my own bias.
Yeah.
Because rejecting them is rejecting a part of me. And they taught me something, and it's something I'll leave this with everyone now. Essentially, the concept that disability is a social construct. I am only disabled by depending on who I am with and where I am. So, yes, I've got brittle bones. So I'll give you an example. My home is fully adapted. My windows are automatic. My front door's automatic. My kitchen's lower. I have a walk-in wet room. I have got brittle bones. Yes, that's never going to go away, nor would I want it to. It's part of my identity. But as soon as I get out of my house and the curb isn't lowered, or there's no taxi firm with an accessible car, that's when I become disabled.
Yeah.
And I think taking that onus and putting it onto external factors, because I grew up thinking I was a problem. I was a burden. I was something to be fixed. Let's fix Samantha. And that's something that most disabled people face, whether that's physically having operations to fix us, to get us to walk. You asked me, why do I never want to walk? Well, why? Why would I want to? And as soon as I was like, you know what, how dare you? I'm not the problem. You know, it's society that's the problem. I was born into a world that just wasn't built for me.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that gives me so much confidence because it's like, no, I'm beautiful. I'm me. I bring a lot to this world.
Yeah.
I don't take away from this world.
Yeah.
And I know even at 38, if I were to pass away tomorrow, I've got such a legacy, and that's something to be proud of. And not everyone can say that.
No, I love it, Sam. And I really hope anybody listening can take so much away from this of, like, as you say, be proud of who you are. Yeah. Focus on the positives, not the negatives, you know, and accept it. Life is beautiful. Everybody is beautiful, and take it forward.
Yeah.
Now, my final question, you touched upon it there a little bit, which is, what is your legacy? We don't want you to pass away tomorrow, as you just said, right? But, you know, in years to come, decades to come, what do you want Samantha Renke to remember for?
I guess, a bit cheesy, but I think I want people when I interact with people, my mum said the other day, she went, "Oh, you just talk to everyone, don't you?" And I went, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Because we're just people."
Yeah.
And I think that's what I want on my gravestone. Like, Samantha, she talked to everyone.
Oh.
And I think that's beautiful, because we can get so wrapped up into our own issues or feel like we have no connection or similarities with people because of their skin colour, religion. But at the end of the day, probably can't say this, we all go out the same. And we all feel pain, and we all want respect. We all want love. We all want friendship. And I hope that I bring that. I hope that me being in a room or a space with someone, or even just interacting with someone in a supermarket, asking them to give me some help. I hope that, they go away having a positive interaction.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that one positive interaction can be all that person needs, because you don't know what they're going through at the end of the day. And I hope that's what I bring. Yeah. I hope I make people smile.
Oh, and you do. Every time I see you, and I hope people will take that away. And there's a bit of an action there. I think you mentioned there, speak to everyone. Yeah. People have their biases, check your biases, but go and speak to everyone. Often the people with what you perceive as the most different to you, you have more in common than you'll ever know. But go out there and speak to them and go and educate yourself.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Leave your ego at the door, I often say.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
No place to go. Anyway, Samantha, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you as always. And
we appreciate you.
Oh, see you soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
A huge thank you to you, our listeners, for being part of our community by watching, subscribing, liking, and also leaving comments on all of our videos. It truly means so much to us, and it helps us to grow the show, making it possible for us to invite even more amazing guests for future seasons. And if there's someone you'd love to see on the show, do let us know. Your suggestions help us bring on incredible guests that you really want to hear from. Feel free to leave those in the comments or send a message directly to me on my social channels at @GianPower. We'd love to hear from you. Have you found the episodes? How have they made you feel? Have they inspired you, challenged you in any which way? Share your experience. We always love to hear your stories. And we've got some super exciting plans ahead. And with your support, we can take the SuperPower podcast to even greater heights. So if you're enjoying the show, please hit that follow button on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you're listening. And hey, if you're watching on board your in-flight entertainment, remember to follow us when you land. Or if you've got Wi-Fi in the sky, hit that follow or subscribe button now. For now, thank you once again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the SuperPower Podcast with me, Gian Power.